The honourable member for Thornhill.
That member must be new here. But what I was saying is that we can't keep track of all of the scandals. But we're here again, day after day, asking for accountability. And it is hard not to feel disappointed by your government where every day there's a new scandal. Do you know who said that, Mr. Speaker? Those were the words of the Prime Minister more than 10 years ago, back when he was somebody who at least pretended to care about honesty and transparency. But that was then, and this is now, and it's 9 years later of this Liberal-NDP government, and they have proven that absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's another day and another scandal, just another reason why we're here, and indeed deeply disappointed in this government. $400 million of taxpayer money, that's what's in question. That's more than the sponsorship scandal, another scandal that they are well known for in Canadian history. Over 186 conflict of interests, as determined by the Auditor General, and more Liberal arrogance and sanctimony that seem to say or suggest that the rules are for me and not for thee. We've already been here for a week trying to make the government turn over the documents, at least to the police, and comply with an order from you, Mr. Speaker. He ruled that they are what they're up to, or whoever's advice they're taking, is against the rules, and that they should produce these documents for the House. But they refuse to listen, ignoring the order right here in this House, an order of Parliament, and the decision of the Speaker in a blatant effort to obstruct the truth and hide the paper trail. That's why we're here again, day after day. If they're trying this hard, then there must be something really bad in those documents. And we're going to find out somehow. And we're going to be here for as long as it takes for the people of this country to get accountability for the corruption, for them to turn those documents over to police so that this place can get back to doing the work of Parliament. Yeah. The Liberal government wants to send this motion to committee where it will die an ungraceful death, out of the view of Canadians, and we will not let that happen. Because, Mr. Speaker, you know that when somebody takes something from you, you don't call the committee, you call the police. And that's exactly what we're asking them to do. That's exactly what the order of the House asks them to do. So you see, there's a way to bury this out of sight and out of mind, out of the accountability, to skirt the consequences of whatever they're hiding. But like I said, we'll be here for as long as it takes. For as long as it takes for Canadians to get the accountability that they deserve. Because we know that if we don't do that, the Liberal corruption will just continue. We know that it'll just continue if we don't do something about it. They have proven time and time again that they will put their interests and the interests of wealthy, well-connected friends above everything else, even at a time where Canadians are skipping meals or just trying to get by. The International Trade Minister proved that when she spent tens of thousands of dollars on media training provided by a close friend, and then claimed not to know that you can't do that here. The International Development Minister proved it when he paid nearly $100,000 to a sister of one of his staffers for also media training. He didn't even try to cover it up. He gave the money to a food marketing company for, quote, political PR. And judging by his performance, it certainly wasn't worth the cost. The former finance minister, Bill Morneau, proved again and again, like the time where he somehow forgot that he owned a luxury villa in France, when he sold off the shares to a company that he directly influenced as finance minister. And let's not forget about the Prime Minister, who himself, the Prime Minister, was in breach of conflict of interest rules while in office. He used his position to get VIP treatment from foreign officials in violation of ethics laws. He did it again during the We Charity scandal, funneling nearly $1 billion into an organization that employed members of his family and members of the finance minister's family also. And who could forget SNC-Lavalin, where the government spent more months inappropriately pressuring the Attorney General to give preferential treatment to a big, powerful, Liberal supporting company, despite a paper trail of corrupt actions from here all the way to the Great White North. or the former MP or the former Liberal MP who got over $200 million on a sole source contract to provide equipment that was never used. I know that it's difficult to keep up with scandals. I find it difficult too, and I work here. And of course, the Arrive scam scandal. They gave $54 million for an app that could have been built in a weekend for $250,000, an app that didn't work and sends tens of thousands of people into quarantine inadvertently. They covered up the scandal just like they're covering up whatever they're covering up today. And it's a shame that we see all this grift and corruption happening in Ottawa. These are just a few examples. And I think about what my family would say about this, what my parents would say about this. They came to this country with nothing. They were refugees from a communist Eastern Europe countries, as many members of this chamber know. And my dad drove a taxi, and he worked in a small business, so my mom, me, and my brother could go to school. My parents paid their taxes. And they did what they were asked to do by society. They scrimped and they saved, and they worked harder than anybody I ever knew just to give us a better life. And it's these tax dollars that the government is using to ship to Liberal insiders. It's these tax dollars that single mothers who work overtime just to have a little bit extra every month so that they can pay for food or put another tank of gas in the car. It's tax dollars like these for seniors who have to make a choice between eating and heating their home, paying for medicine, or the cost of living in Canada has just gotten too high for them. It's the tax dollars of those who recently came to this country, who came here with a vision painted for them by the government, only to find out that things here are far, far from what they expected and what they were promised. 1 million people in my province alone used a food bank in the last month. And the best that the government could do for them is to take their money and use it for people whose only qualification for it was to have a Liberal membership card. They gave almost $400 million to a board that they appointed so they can give it to their own companies. That's what we're discussing here today. And then they go back to those middle-class families, because it's the middle-class families that are using food banks to tell them that their taxes are too low and that they should pay even more in taxes so that they can do more of this, and we can have days and days in this Parliament to get them to turn over the evidence of their wrongdoing to the police. The government doesn't even have the basic respect to tell Canadians what is going on with their tax dollars. And if they did, we wouldn't be here for the 7th day in a row. They're covering up the evidence again, and that's exactly why we're here. And we are going to be here until they produce those documents, like you said they should, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of Liberal membership cards, I think we should talk about corruption in this government. And I don't know that we can do that without bringing up Mark Carney, carbon tax Carney, as we like to call him, and I think many other Canadians are now calling him. Just a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister gave carbon tax Carney a plum job of being the new phantom finance minister, giving him a job that he so desperately wanted. So he got all the perks, or he's getting all the perks of being finance minister. He gets to set economic policy, he gets to give the Prime Minister advice, but none of the burdens, like the pesky ethics and conflict of interest rules that everybody else would have to go through if they still worked in the private sector, like he does. That means he gets to continue to sit on boards of massive corporations like Brookfield, and where he can continue the time-worn Liberal tradition of enriching insiders with Canadian tax dollars, the exact same thing that they refuse to produce documents for in this House today. And it took him just days to get there. Already, Brookfield is asking Ottawa for another $10 billion new fund. That's a fund that Brookfield would pocket in terms of management fees. We have no idea how much he's going to get paid for that, have no idea what that looks like, what the returns will be. These are just a few of the jobs. Chair of Brookfield is one of them. The Prime Minister's phantom finance minister is another, but he's got another one. On top of all of that, he's going to be the guy that is going to be in charge of raising dough for the Liberals in the next election campaign. It's already sliding into your inbox, asking for money if you're on the Liberal donor list, unless you've put them in the spam folder like it seems like most Canadians have by now. And at some point, the conflict of interest rules, or the breaking of the conflict of interest rules here, are so obvious. It's so obvious that there are problems with this appointment and so many other things that this government does. It's starting to become comical if it wasn't such a serious issue. And maybe Mark Carney can call the other Randy and give him some pointers on conflict of interest. Like, this is what I'm talking about. You can't even keep track. That brings us to where we are today with the Sustainable Development and Technology Canada. That's the organization that we're discussing today. And essentially, it's a billion-dollar slush fund with Canadian tax money spent at will. They were supposed to give money to companies developing new technology that would grow our economy and help reduce the carbon footprint and all of that. But what actually happened? That's what we don't know. Nearly $400 million misspent. 10 businesses not fitting eligibility requirements, but they got $60 million. $60 million. The board members had the rules right in front of them, but they chose not to follow them or simply were unable to. And we have a minister who disregarded all of that, who simply just didn't pay attention. His job is to pay attention. 82% of the contracts analyzed by the Auditor General had conflicts of interest. 82%. If there was a school of corruption, these guys would be honor students. 82% of the contracts. The Auditor General raised the red flags. Members from many parties in this House, even the NDP, who are practically still best friends with them, they ripped up the agreement a couple weeks ago and then they taped it back together, and now we're in this weird time where they sort of yell at them a little bit. They raised red flags too, but the Liberals refused to respect the order of this House, an order that reigns supreme in this country, an order that the Speaker ordered them, and we've been here before. We already knew that they disrespect laws and all kinds of ethics norms for how ministers should behave, how the Prime Minister should behave. He broke the law. And that's just one more example on how they disrespect Parliament too. We saw it when they tried to use it during the COVID crisis as an excuse to give themselves unprecedented spending powers, probably to funnel more money into Liberal pockets. And we're still unraveling some of that. Because that's exactly what happened just months later. They got caught red-handed in the We Charity scandal. And rather than face Parliament, they decided to prorogue Parliament in a clear effort to avoid accountability. Some would say that maybe there's an expectation that they would do that again. And then there was the Winnipeg lab case, where again and again they were held in contempt of Parliament for refusing to produce documents and stonewalling the investigations of this House. And that is just another case of incompetence, of corruption, and exactly what we're going to keep talking about on behalf of all of Canadians that want accountability and that want answers from them. And it's clear that there's only one avenue left. The government clearly does not care about the Ethics Commissioner or the Auditor General because they disregard them so often. There used to be something called ministerial accountability in this place. And when ministers are in scandals, they either get promotions, they're kept in cabinet, they're shuffled to a different role where maybe they're out of the spotlight for a little bit, but nobody ever faces consequences. And it's obvious that that extends to their disrespect for Parliament too. So it's time to call in the big guns, the RCMP. They should turn over the documents to the RCMP. If this happened in any business, then you wouldn't have to go to some committee. You would turn everything you had over to the cops, especially if you're telling Canadians that you have nothing to hide, especially if you're boasting, like the Minister of Science boasts every day in this House, that he has had 4 investigations on this. And yet they're refusing to provide documents. And their arguments change as the days go on. First, it was some charter violation, some weird argument of a charter violation, which is questionable because there are some ministries the turned over documents. So it's only charter violations if you don't want them to see the documents that have something really bad in them. I'm going to say this very slowly so that people at home understand that the charter is there to protect people from the government, and it is not there to protect the Liberals from giving almost $400 million to their friends. Their story changed again. Well, the cops don't even want these documents. I think that's the latest refrain. Or that Parliament doesn't have to do that because the cops don't want all of the documents. If you have nothing to hide, then turn over the documents. But I'm sure there is something to hide, because we wouldn't be in the 7th day of speaking at length about this very motion, an obstruction, a defiance of a speaker's ruling, where they should be able to turn those documents over to the police so that Canadians can get the accountability that they deserve and that we can get this place back to work. Back to work for all of those who cannot afford to eat, for the 2 million people that use a food bank across the country over the course of a month, for those who can't afford a home because the price of a home has doubled over the last 9 years. The price of rent has doubled. The price of a mortgage payment has more than doubled. With inflation and interest rates rampant out of control over the last number of years, putting Canadians further and further behind. The crime, the chaos, the drugs, the disorder in our streets. What is happening in this country. The burning of a Canadian flag in one of our largest cities in front of an art gallery where people shout in the streets now, "Death to Canada." Those are the things that Parliament and some ministers who don't have the courage to get up and condemn it, and an awful lot of silence from everybody in the backbenches on issues like that. That's the work that Parliament should be getting back to. And instead, they will get up and they will make argument after argument. Some make less sense than the last ones they put forward, and their story changes every single day. But, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives will be here for as long as it takes for Canadians to get the accountability, for them to turn over the documents to the police so they know who got rich, which Liberal insiders with Liberal memberships got rich with $400 million of tax money. That's what we're here to do, Mr. Speaker. And I assure Canadians that when they get the answers to those questions, they are not going to like them. The Auditor General only has so much power, and it is Parliament that is supreme, that can order those documents, because we, the people here in these seats, are elected by the people that want the accountability for the government. And if this government believed in the institutions that it purports to protect, then they would trust the RCMP to redact whatever they needed to redact to keep the privacy of those who made no trouble at all private, and to make sure that those who needed to get the accountability from the people actually face justice for potential criminality. That's why we're here today. That's why we're going to continue to be here on behalf of Canadians to get accountability. They should turn over those documents to the police, and so we can get back to work. Thanks.